Hello, hello. So as we go live, I believe we are live. Welcome, welcome. This is our Gene Key transit for the full moon in Taurus. I didn't change all my things, so I might pause couple times. It's awesome. It's exactly what we needed. Who didn't need a little grounding, comfort, energy? For me, it's a little difficult because it's super grounding compared to how I usually feel, but that's good. That helps me to focus without effort and to, you know, keep coming back to center in ways that are not as easy for me. Typically, I am a rising Scorpio and sun and moon in Cancer. So a lot of water with me. I'm used to just one flood flowing into the other. It's just a little bit too much clarity for me. So I don't know how you're dealing with the full moon in Taurus, but it does help. It does help get to my points on time. But other than that, it just feels weird. It feels weird being earthy. I don't know. I don't know how y'all do it. But yes, we do appreciate it because we needed the energy. We definitely needed it. That feeling of being just front and center. I know what I know. I say what I say, right? So that comes from the human design body graph, where the gate 23 is how the throat connects to the ajna. So in that is that's what it's meant for. It's meant for how we are speaking to our intuition, right? And so just knowing that tells you a little bit about what's going on, why it may feel like you have a glimpse of clarity in ways that you didn't have before, why you may be even, oh, I didn't turn and put in my microphone. I'm gonna go ahead and do that because it's usually my voice can play a little softly sometimes over the microphone. So yeah, so it can play that way. It can be that way that we feel that it's easier to access our intuition, to be clear in what we know for ourselves. We might get a little tied up in the complexity and the shadow of complexity if we're trying to over explain what we just intuitively know that comes from our inner wisdom. And so it can cause an interference with our information getting communicated clearly out of a fear that we won't be able to. So we make it more complicated than it needs to be, and therefore have just the interruption of the vibe, you know? So it's good because we get to do a little grounding before we get into a little fun during Christmas time. And hopefully it'll feel pretty festive this year. The new moon in Sagittarius with a beautiful, beautiful key 9 coming up in December on the 1st. So that's the new moon. And while we are on our way there, we have this lovely energy of being able to alchemize simplicity. It comes from the ring of life and death. It comes from the reality that we complicate situations when we're speaking if we're reacting out of fear. And it's the result of us trying to think our way out of the box, our mind trying to control the environment so that we can feel safe, right? And so when you're having trouble hearing and understanding yourself, when you get really emotional, and it's really easy to be really emotional right now because there's a lot to be emotional about, right? And then there's a lot of emotional people around you, so that can spark off into an argument really quickly. And we are going to have that desire to kind of want to protect what we believe we know and what we think others should just know, right? So don't let that take you away into that shadow of complexity again, because if you're fighting against the current, then it's going to just feel like you're interfering with what can and will happen if we are just honest with ourselves and honest with each other and let our our power of our own energy speak for itself, right? Instead of trying to add to it to make it good enough that people will hear you. Okay, this is coming with a programming partner of deafness, and the programming partner plays like an opposition if you know Western astrology. So it's just that having that access of the fact the shadow of deafness can be part of the problem here, that we're being deaf to our own intuition, or we're being deaf to how people are receiving us as we speak, and feeling that, again, that we have to be in control of the situation in order for the message to come through. So in the Gene Keys, it's giving us this understanding that if we're trying to repress that fear of not being understood, that we don't say anything at all, or we don't speak clearly, and then or we get confused when we do speak and we decide that it's better not to speak, and just out of self-protection you just lapse into silence, or you go to something that everybody can agree on, like, how is the weather? It's cooling down, isn't it? Right? So that can be a reaction out of not feeling that it's you're being truly heard for your and truly honored for your wisdom and insight. So the option here is just go ahead and say what you mean, and then you can let it go if people aren't hearing it. The reactive side of that energy, though, in the shadow, is fragmented. So you end up saying something, you just blurt something out of a need to fill the silence, and then it's the completely wrong thing to say. I'm sure we've all had that moment. Or you say the right thing, but it's the wrong time to say it. And this is actually reflected also in Karen Curry Parker's human design, or quantum human design definition as well. It's just this idea that the timing is off, right? And that also lends to complexity. This interfering with our quality of, again, getting that communication off clearly. And so people don't receive it because they may be in the middle of receiving something else, or it may be their turn to speak. And so they're so absorbed in what they're trying to say that they're not even listening to you anymore, right? They're in their own head to try to figure out what to say next. So what's really powerful about this energy when you're living in the genius of simplicity is that we clear the clutter of the mind, and it's really just the appreciation of simpleness, right? Like, there's this story that a mentor of mine will talk about when they talk about how people will pay more for a job poorly done. And it's about this locksmith, and then beginning of his career, that he was trying to open the doors, and he was new, so he kept breaking the locks, and they would have to pay to replace the whole thing, and they would have to, pay for his service. And then in the early part of his career, people would actually give him tips because they saw how hard he was working and how much he was trying, and they would give him more money, right? And then as he got better and he wasn't breaking locks anymore and he could do it really quickly and it was on and off, they were like started complaining, why am I paying so much, right? It's this idea that if it looks like you're working really hard and you're trying really hard and you're doing a lot of things and you look busy, then you're worth your keep, so to speak, right? That belief is flies in the face of the beauty of simplicity, right? Because somebody who is skilled, is practiced, is going to go in there and make it look easy, right? And so the understanding that it takes skill and practice, and there's a high value in making it look easy, right? And letting it be simple. And so when you can allow things to, like, all the dross to burn off, you don't have to like put a little extra spray of water on your face to make it look like you've sweated through a hard task. That's something that I used to do on shows on TV when we were younger, right? Like people would go to the store and buy food, or go to the restaurant and buy a ready-made meal, and then put it on the table, and then come out with like sprayed water on their face. They just flick some water on their face and put some flour. They're like, oh, are you enjoying the meal? I hope you enjoyed my efforts of what, I love you so much. I've done so much for you today by making this fabulous meal, right? That we don't have to do that. We don't have to perform our value. And so that's what we're being taught in this energy. And the insight here is that if we deeply connect, and when we deeply connect, we're deeply connecting with the field. And when we deeply connect with the field is vibrational. And so sound and light are the aspects in which it is transmitted. So Richard Rudd talks about here the acoustic field of sound, and that when we're really deeply connected, then we can hear exactly what needs to be said. And this is something that I practice within the Oman's vocal resonance method, is what I teach in vocal alchemy. And I've seen it happen. It's just when we get quiet enough to hear what really wants to come through. And then the hard part is that we're, not being so scared that we don't allow ourselves to settle into that. So I've developed a practice in which we are definitely settling into that, and we're allowing ourselves to tap in and then see what happens from there. So we're coming from a clear place. So even if it goes wrong, at least we have a sense of what happened when it went that way, right? Otherwise, that phrase, just do it by Nike, then you're just out there doing things. You don't even know what's going wrong or right. You don't know why it's going wrong or right, because you're not keeping track, you're not aware, you're not present, right? My thing is, if you're gonna just do it, then breathe and then just do it. Like breathe, get centered, and then just do it, right? Don't just jump into it. I think action is great because you're gonna learn something, right? Whether it's good or bad, you're going to learn something if you just do and have some experience coming from what you've done. And it'll be even better. The tools and the wisdom that you pick up from that experience will be even greater if you're present fully and you're aware of what's happening in a very clear way, right? And so, yeah, so that that aspect of deafness is not a shadow in that it's wrong, right? So that programming partner that's reflecting that energy in the opposition, it's not that it's wrong to be deaf, it's just that how are we allowing that to shift us into what is possible, right? So what the genius is in the programming partner, that gift is insight, right? So if we are allowing the things that we don't need to hear, that aren't part of what's important and relevant and wise and impactful and about the experience we're having, we can be deaf to that, and we can focus on what is important. And that's how you can get deeper in your insight and deeper in the wisdom, by allowing it to be just one point of focus, that simplicity, right? That one point is just that one thing. Everything is one. And now it's simple. It's all one thing. And if it's all one thing, then we're all in this together type of feeling, right? So when you're able to do that, you can feel into the essence of a thing. So that's the city of the quintessence. And quintessence is like the quintessential essence, right? It's the pinnacle of the focal output or value of a thing, right? So I don't know if output's value though, so I'm not going to go down that road in the effort to keep it simple. But but it is that. It's just being able to focus in on what is essential for ourselves. So yay, yeah. Um, he mentions in this part, in this chapter, in this key, the Eightfold Path. And I love that because I think when we can have specific things that are helping us realize what is essential in a moment, then we can keep coming back to that as a GPS, so to speak, of like, are we in tune with the higher vibrational possibilities of our lives, right? So I'm going to go ahead and tell you the Eightfold Path practices that I Googled. So it is to have a right viewpoint, to have a right resolve, to have right speech, to have right conduct, the way you live your life, to have a right livelihood, so the livelihood that makes sense for your purpose, the right effort, so the right amount of action and moving towards something, right? And the right mindfulness and the right samadhi. So I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but that's the word, Samadhi. And it essentially means a meditative absorption or union. To be within the essence of a thing is how I hear that, right? And so we're getting this and understanding that if we're just allow ourselves to truly be with something and feel and dive into it energetically is how I think of that, but be with it fully, then we get to the shiny essence of a thing, right? And that is, shiny essence experiences are essentially what we're here for. That's our, like, what makes everything worth everything. So yeah, so Karen Curry Parker describes the state as transmission. Tells about the inevitability of change and how some of us take that as challenging. And what happens is if we find that challenging, that everything's changing all the time, we try to over anticipate. It looks like jumping the gun. And I've seen this a few times. It's so interesting because it's been coming out in sports lately. I've seen that a couple of times. And not despairing if people aren't ready to change. So even though this energy is like allowing our intuitive download to be communicated in a way that causes a transformation, because that's essentially the point of a genius and gift, is for it to cause that beautiful enlivening, enlightening, right? That happens when we are truly tuned into a thing. So if people aren't ready for it, though, we can't make them be ready for evolution. So that's the hard part. Right. So we know this, a lot of us are dealing with this as a reality of our experience right now. We can't make people change who are not ready to change. And that's unfortunate, right? And we are finding that challenging in this energy. But optimally, we're recognizing, right? We're recognizing that. I'm just double checking that I'm still online because I heard a sound. But yeah, that we're recognizing that we have a transformative insight, that we can still change people as they become ready, right? And that you trust that you don't have to prove that you're on the right track by having somebody else have the right reaction to it, right? So it's more about not letting the the externals, right, what other people are doing, define how far you or how much you've done or how valuable what you're doing is, right? So if they're not reacting the way that would look like an evolved transformation, that does not mean that you're wrong or that your intuition is off. You can trust it as it is, right? So unbalanced in this energy looks like pressuring other people to transform before they're ready, being in despair or being bitter when people don't understand like how crazy it is that people do things. All right, I'm not going there. I don't feel like it. And then in that energy, right, that we are allowing the change to take place as it is in flow, and that we allow it to happen in a way that allows people to come to their own realities of their life path. And it's going to be beautiful, y'all. I mean, I think we're all a little bit more on fire to share with the people who are ready. And then the people who aren't, that, you just bring it into their awareness and then to live that timing so that it can allow the transformation to unfold. Plant those seeds, right, for when the tree is ready to pop up above the ground. So the contemplations I took away for y'all to work on, if y'all like to journal stuff, is from Karen Curry Parker's Quantum Human Design are: do I trust what I know? What comes up for me when I know something, but I don't know how I know what I know? So this goes back to if you're getting like an intuitive download and you really feel like it's time to say it, and then you say it, are you trying to make it more complicated than it needs to be, right? It goes back to that. And then the affirmation here is: I change the world with what I know. My insights and awareness have the ability to transform the way people think and perceive the world. And I need you all to take that and run, take it to the bank, right? Like, it is what people need to hear. And more than ever, people are going to be ready, if only because they have to, right? That things are changing enough, they have to start looking at new viewpoints, right? And so when that starts to happen, we got to be up and ready to go, right? I'm putting all my people in charge. Like if anybody is watching, all of y'all, are part of what the world needs more of. I know that about my people and I know that about my clients, and they're amazing and beautiful and brilliant and wise. And we need more of that, right? And so the more we use our voices and speak up in the world, the more we get the world we want to live in. Okay, guys. So it's just something it's the fire in my belly. I just wanted to say that. And then the three things to let go of this full moon in Taurus. So, first one I have is let's let go of how other people hear. Okay. So this is something that I talk about a lot for people who sing in my sessions. Not everybody does. A lot of us that come into my work are speakers, right? And or space holders. And they're just learning how to regulate that energy that comes through so that they can be fully present to the mission and get all the transformation that wants to happen in the room available and ready to go, right? And so one thing that we talk about is hearing. That if some people think they're tone deaf, and some people have been called tone deaf, and by people who can match pitch. And that's what I know is that you can't be deaf if you heard it, right? There's actually a medical definition of deafness, and that's not it, right? If you heard it, then you heard it. And if you heard it, you heard it correctly, not questioning our own intuition, what we are picking up in the sonic vibrations, okay? Not questioning it. If you hear it, it's what you heard, and it's the way you hear it, and it's perfect. Okay. So let it go if you think that you need to hear things how other people hear them. Okay. We're going to let that go. Number two, we're going to let go of what others misunderstand about you. This is one of the biggest things that hold people back, including me. In the beginning, it was all about, oh my God, if I say this, they're going to think this. If I say that, they're going to think this, and they won't like me anymore. And for some reason, I was deathly afraid of people I didn't know and probably may not not liking me anymore. Right. And what we learn, especially as we grow older and wiser, is that who cares? Like, if, especially for the people who aren't ever interested in understanding you. Why are we worried about what they'll say? And I think about this now and I'm like, ooh, that need to protect ourselves is so big, probably from the history of our ancestors, right? And 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 we are in such a privileged space at this point. There's no better time to say what's on your mind. Let the people who misunderstand. If you get around to it, you can always help them understand. If not, then I'm sure they'll find out from somebody eventually, right? And if not, the world will not end. It may feel that way sometimes, but it will not, I promise. All right. And then the third thing to let go of is proving your wisdom. Your wisdom is not to be proven any more than divine acts or what is beautiful or um, I don't know. I don't know what you hear. You don't need to prove that you heard something correctly. um, I don't know. There's so many different ways that we take this, and what it actually is doing is saying that somehow there's something wrong with us. So we have to fix the way we are innately, right? And the way we hear is innate. Like you either hear or you don't hear. Like you can improve your hearing and you can have a refined sense of hearing, but essentially you start where you start. And that's true for everything. So it's okay to be flawed in the beginning. Like I sent out an email today that had your, and I just put UOUR Y-O-U-R. I'm like, I said something wrong. Um, and I'm like, oh no, it's supposed to be you are. I was supposed to be you are. So I forgot the apostrophe. It was like one of my biggest fears in the world, right? And if it had happened last year, even, I think I would have lost it a little bit. I think I would literally have spent at least an hour or two or a whole night just beating myself up over that problem because a lot of my people are incredible writers. I don't know why, but it just happens that way. My clients tend to be amazing, amazing writers and editors, and they are like, they're so good at it. And I'm like, oh, if I had any other clientele, they probably wouldn't even notice, but my people will notice. And so I think about it now and I'm like, oh no, but I'm laughing about it. Last year, I would not be laughing. I would be shook. I would be shook if this had happened last year. So it will change. And that's why I love for people to do my work. Again, if you've never seen the Oman's vocal resonance method, check out one of my voice videos. And we always start with the first 4 steps. So dive in because those first 4 steps are life changing if you do them. And that what happens is you entrain a sense of confidence into your body through your own voice. And it doesn't have to be perfect. There's nothing about pitch about it. It's just the experience that does that for you. It helps calibrate you to your own vibration. And so the next part is 3 content ideas for my peeps. All right. 3 content ideas. What I do is I pick out a question and that you can focus on for content. And you can probably make a ton of content from any one of these questions, but I give 3 for each moon. And so over the course of the 2 weeks, however you observe the moons, whether you do a week on each side or a week forward or 2 weeks forward, which is kind of how I've been playing it because it's convenient for me. So 2 weeks from now until the new moon in December 1st, we are using these focus points for content ideas. So the first question is, what words would you use that would drive traditional marketers crazy? I love this question because pretty much everything I do drives marketers crazy. So pretty much what I'm already doing, I'm using words like alchemy, which drives marketers crazy. But what? Because it's going to be always. What do you mean by that? But like I literally mean alchemy. I don't know how else to say it. Now there is the whole chemical alchemy that I don't mean that, but I do mean the different phases and processes and what shifts and allows things to transmute. I am literally talking about that as a breath to voice transmutation. Okay, so I mean it literally. I get to use it because I mean it literally, and not everybody does, but I do. I don't know what else to tell you about that, right? So I can explain it further when people come into my circle. But until then, you're just going to have to assume that I mean it literally because I do, right? Voice. This is another one. Like it drives me crazy. I literally work with the voice and people still have to ask me why because people talk about the voice, your voice as a your unique voice of how you write or how you are interpreting beauty for your brand, right? Your voice as in and people use it as a unique quality of your being that people can hear, right? And so that's the thing, like energy, we're going to talk about this in a second, but energy just is, right? So your energy is, but how do we have something from you that we can all agree on? What's that first step? It's voice, right? So it's that meeting place between the unseen and the seen, which is why I think it's literal alchemy, right? And if you've heard the saying already, right, all words are spells. That's why we call it spelling, right? And that only happens, words happen with the voice, right? So it's all of those things. And so when you talk about voice, people still are like, okay, like, I don't know what you mean. In what way do you mean voice? I mean voice. I mean literally the sound that's coming out of our mouths, right? So the third word I would use is vibrational resonance, which again, is just what they would consider a high technical word. Because again, a lot of people use vibration and they're using high vibe without the reference of math or science, which is fine. I know, and I mean it literally. I mean the vibrations that your voice cause and what they can and do impact, especially if we're in awareness and alignment and are resonant. And so I mean that as a literal physics term, resonating vibration is what I'm looking for actual amplification, not of sound, meaning amplification of sound would be getting louder, but in increasing the capacity to move and therefore get to more spaces or go deeper. Go deeper is what I was trying to say. So it just increases the capacity to reach uh, distance and people, right? So number 2 question, content idea. What is the inner wisdom? Intuitive North Star is another way to say that. What is the inner wisdom, the download, the intuition that guides you to what helps others? And so what I love about this question is that it reminds me of like Terrence Howard, if you haven't heard his, I think his guiding knowledge was, ooh, I forgot. But it was something around geometry. It was something around, yeah, geometry, I believe. And so that like seed is what drove him to look into all these things and develop all these um, different ways of applying math and geometry into actual physical things and things like AI and not, well, that's a form of AI, but basically visual products that help people to see dimensionally without, you know, with like glasses and stuff like that. So I wish I remember the word because that was the point of the story. But for me, that word is energy, right? So, and then the other kind of side of that to me, voice is energy, so it's almost the same thing. But yeah, so what is that to you? Like when you delve deeply and you allow it to be as simple as that one thing, what does it reveal to you? That's the wisdom, right? And if you're not sure what it is, just look at, if you're like me, you have a ton of interests. What are the meeting place of all those interests? That is your inner intuitive North Star. Okay. So for me, it's everything is energy. From I don't even know how young I understood that. I had read it in like a science book, I think it was in our encyclopedia set. But Britannica, we used to have encyclopedia sets back in the day. Um, and when I read that, it just something recognized it in me. And I would bring it everywhere because we were going to church and then go to church and like people would get really excited and say some really strange things. And I knew some of the stuff they couldn't really mean because they were too excited and it was not going, exactly how they thought it was going to go. I think a lot of times. And I was like, well, they can't like everything can't be correct. So how am I supposed to know what is right and what is wrong? Well, I decided that if it correlated with energetic principles, then it was probably right. And if it didn't create, gel with what happened in energetic principles, and I saw that as nature because I was also seeing that as everything is made of it, everything is made of energy, right? So that's everything that we see in the world, and that includes nature. And nature is very telling. It's a very wise and teaches us lessons all the time, right? And so what I realized is like, well, if God created the world and created nature, well, then what was happening out there is what was happening in us as well, right? And so if you're saying something that's against nature, then it can't be quite right because then God made that, right? And so that's always been my clarity, right? And no matter how strongly people believe that they understand every translation of the Bible, I will always choose what is actually here and created over what people's opinions and perspectives are, right? And that all energy is in life is made up of vibration, right? So all energy has waves, and those waves create vibration. And so that is my link to voice. right? So that is my truth. Every time I come back to that and how the energy works and how the nature works and how voice works, it always brings me into this deep wisdom and insight. So what's that for you? Okay. Number 3, what role do you play in creating simplicity for your clients? Okay. So how do you make your clients' lives more simple and easy? So hopefully there's something that's happening there. And hopefully, and some of us, and I know my people are deep thinkers, so they like complex information. They tend to be bringing together so many kinds of information that they all feel like all the nuggets are so worthy, right? So sometimes it looks a little complicated, but the truth is that they're bringing through that information so that we can clarify things on the other side, right? And that's the same for me. I might get a little complicated with the energy and the vibration and the astrology and the sound and like experience and energy and all of these things of why I think these things are important. But the reality is that it helps people to simplify their approach to building confidence in something they have yet to experience. And so that is what I think is simplified when people do my work. Because otherwise, you're either just believing you can never do something, so you never do it enough to build confidence, or you try to go at it ham hock and like, oh, I'll just keep doing it until I feel better, right? Which I know that's a technique for a lot of speakers and performers. And I've always thought I was like crazy. But, I know practice takes, is what's needed, and practicing performing is needed. I actually had a group in North Carolina called Singer Circle. That was the whole point of that group. And so I know that's needed. And if we practice in a certain way with the level of understanding of how things are moving in real time and not trying to like keep everything still for the purpose of perfection, then we can completely shift the clarity of which we show up to something that we can't anticipate everything for. And that is called life. You cannot anticipate everything in life, but we can still be confident moving through life if we have our own points of reference and our own points of development, of natural developments of creation and cycles. We can make it easier by getting a little bit more complex. So that is how I see it. All right, guys, that's pretty much it for today, this evening. Yeah, if you have any questions, find me. Oh, I totally forgot, y'all. Next week is Voicing Your Vision Summit. I'll say that again. Next week is Voicing Your Vision Summit. Please, please, please register. I will put the link in the description right after this. And if you want to just type it in, voicingyourvisionsummit.com. Do not add the HTTPS. It doesn't live like that. It lives only at voicingyourvisionsummit.com or without the S, okay? So when you register there, you get all of these amazing speakers for free. We have doctors, we have business builders, like people that have worked with major corporations. We have amazing healers, creatives, intuitives that are working with a lot work similar to mine in their own facets. We have this amazing lady coming in, teaching us how to decode our sexual desires and fantasies so that we can allow that knowledge to help us shift what states we're in, and so that we can be more ourselves. And that's really the trick, right? Because otherwise the ego takes over and tells us who we should be, and then we feel like we're not seen and heard, and then we feel misunderstood, right? So that is awesome. There's so many amazing people. I'm bringing back some of our first speakers. So I have the recordings for Virgil Ortiz and Myra Jackson, which were amazing. And if you at all are into nature and how we are truly aspects of nature, I highly suggest both of those be checked out. We have Danny Hanneman coming in live, and he did an interview, and he is powerful. He's an energy worker, had an amazing download he talks about in the interview. And then he's going to join us live on Thursday morning. So he'll be there. So if you want to ask any questions about energy and how energy in business works, and if he feels up to it, he may do a reading for you. And so I would be there just in case, because this dude is off the charts intuitive, and it's an amazing thing to experience. And if you know that you have that capacity, when you have more time with people who are working and living in that office, what happens is that you start understanding points of your own ability to read and work with energy, which is also something we do in vocal alchemy. But you'll get to do it live right there for free if you register now. So I hope to see you there. And I hope you have an amazing rest of your evening. And here's to the simple life for everyone.